and you really have been deemed the most hated woman in America. How does that make you feel?
I didn't know that. Actually, I received an outpouring of love and support.
This is Jodi Arias' interview the day before her sentencing. I'll look at a self-protective and self-serving language that reveals a prominent sense of self-worth and inability to accept responsibility for her actions. I'll analyze key passages using conversation analysis and statement analysis and explain the linguistic concepts along the way.
Time that you started to tear up, a couple of times you were talking about your nieces, talking about Travis's grandmother. Other times it seemed as though you were just completely in control and maybe you were just having a regular conversation. How are you remaining so composed when this jury has your life in their hands?
Well, it was difficult. I think I was shaking, and I didn't know if anyone else would notice, but people commented on it afterward. I was almost convulsing. So I was very nervous.
Jodi starts with admitting that she did maintain composure, but then says, "I think I was shaking." Most people would know if they were shaking, because it's an intense feeling. When she says, "I didn't know if anyone else would notice," she however seems sure that she was shaking. First, we note her use of the mind verb think. Think, as opposed to feel, appeals to the mind, to thought processes. This is going to be a pattern in her language. And second, we note that we should look for duality or even contradictions in her answers. In a subtle way, Jodi actually refutes the interviewer's notion that she was composed. It's obviously sensitive to Jodi to underline that she was indeed nervous. This makes her sound more emotional.
I was emotional, but it's like I have a lot of practice suppressing things, which isn't a good practice, but I utilized a little bit of that so that I could maintain my composure instead of getting overly emotional and not being able to proceed.
Jodi's moving the goalpost. She adds the intensifier overly. The question was about being emotional, not overly emotional. Again, we see that her mind seems to matter more to her than emotions. This is also emphasized by her quick, "I was emotional, but." What follows the parotactic conjunction "but" is always the most important part of a sentence. It's what we really mean, what we really want to say. But minimizes or negates that which preceded it. In this case, her claim to have been emotional.
You realize people view that as being cold.
Well, they're not in my shoes, and I'm certainly not cold.
In conversation analysis, pauses and hesitation matter. Jodi's fast at dismissing people's negative opinions about her compared to when she was asked about her emotions. She seems more confident answering here than when talking about her alleged emotions.
Do you still love him?
Yes.
How can you still love a man that threatened you, as you have alleged, and obviously scared you enough to do something that, I mean, it wasn't just a murder, it was a heinous, hideous murder. How can you say you still love that man that forced you, as you say, to do this to him?
Well, that wasn't the kind of person that he was trying to be.
Jodi immediately takes the bait, trying to seem like the bigger person with this assessment.
And Travis had many wonderful qualities, many redeemable qualities.
In an act of self-repair, she corrects herself to say that Travis had many redeemable qualities. What's the difference, we ask? Redeemable presupposes that Travis was mainly a bad guy.
And, I mean, there's this quote that says, "We love those that know the worst of us and don't turn their faces away." And I don't know who said it. But I think of my family when I think of that, but also because I know the worst of Travis. But
here, Jodi uses the expression to benefit her own narrative, to again make negative statements about Travis. Also, we see hints of Jodi trying to indirectly justify her actions.
But I still wanted him to be happy, and I still wanted the best for him, and I never wanted any of this to happen.
Any of this is distancing language, as we would expect from Jodi wanting to present herself in the best light possible.
What did you want to happen on June 4th, 2008? You went to his house. What were you expecting was going to happen?
I really expected us to just hang out like we'd always done, and that would be the day.
And it turned so horribly wrong.
It really did. Yeah. That's not what I was expecting at all.
Notice the pronoun it in the interviewer's statement, which takes the blame off Jodi, so that Jodi can safely answer with distancing language, as if she hadn't made a conscious decision about committing the crime, and as if she was a spectator to her own actions.
I've gotten to see your mom in court every day, your grandma, your father showed up this week. Their hearts must be breaking.
Yeah, they are. They are.
There were a few times where you'd turn and look at them every now and then, but it seemed like it was few and far between. Why was that?
Well, I tried to remain focused on what was going on in the proceedings, so I didn't want to look back too much because I didn't want to take my attention off of what was important in the proceedings.
We see the same pattern as in the very beginning. Jodi's initially agreeing with the interviewer's observation that she didn't look at her parents a lot during the proceedings. Once again, this question appeals to emotions, probably not a coincidence on the interviewer's part. But Jodi's answer again appeals to the mind. She says she wanted to remain focused and didn't want to take her attention off what was important. Focus is a term within linguistics. Focus has to do with syntax, which words are placed where, which vowels are stressed, and so on. Here, Jodi stresses important, and she makes a stop after this word. Jodi has completed her turn constructional unit, which is what you call an utterance that has reached its possible completion point. However, she then adds in the proceedings. If Jodi hadn't added in the proceedings, what would she have said? Then, indirectly, she would have characterized her parents as unimportant. Again, her mind matters more to her than emotions.
But at the same time, I mean, I don't know how much you noticed, but I looked at them a lot because I don't know how much longer I'm going to see them, and I want to see them.
Are you taking a mental picture of them in your mind?
Jodi now seems aware of the unemotional nature of her previous statement, because she now says she looked at them a lot, even though she started with agreeing with the interviewer that she didn't look at her parents a lot. We also observe the subtle criticism of the interviewer. Again, we note the duality that's present in Jodi's language. This is not the language of a reliable person.
Why are you talking to the media on what could be the eve of your verdict, death or life? What's in it for you at this point?
Well, my hope is that my agenda at this point is to bring awareness to domestic violence, because I feel like, I'm here for my own bad choices, but in part I'm also here because of that.
Jodi's answer mimics the way she acted in court, trying to present herself as an ambassador for quote-unquote other victims. She says my own bad choices, not decisions. There's an important difference between these two words. Choice is selection from alternatives, whereas decision does not imply alternatives. Using the word choices makes her action sound less calculating, and is another example of distancing language, since she's not specific about what these choices are. She's euphemizing the crime she committed. In statement analysis, euphemisms are one of the main signs of deception. Euphemisms portray the subject's behavior in a more favorable light and minimize the damage they've done.
And I don't know if you'll air it or not, because I told Troy Hayden the same thing and it didn't air. But if I could say one thing, I just really want people to document what they go through. Because if I had documented what I went through, there would be proof of it. And that's one of the big issues in my case, is that there is no physical proof.
She starts with sounding humble, and then proceeds with sounding concerned about people in general. Here, she's speaking as an ambassador for a more general societal problem, and then she shifts to her own case, again portraying Travis as an abuser and her as a victim. We see a shift between general and specific. Jodi uses general problems to support and indirectly benefit her own case.
Is that what all the recording was about? Were you documenting at that point, or why did you start recording conversations? And it just seemed a little odd that it was a private moment and then you were recording those things.
Well,
was it?
That's just something we did. I've never done that with any guy before.
By using the pronoun we for the sake of association, Jodi seizes the opportunity to blame Travis for her recording their conversations, making Travis an ally in this decision, even though the interviewer asked why Jodi did it. Pronoun switches are always important because pronouns are largely intuitive. They're one of the first areas of grammar that we learn. What's yours, what's mine, what's ours, and so on. Pronoun switches indicate a sudden change in the subject's state of mind. Here, Jodi has self-serving reasons for saying we instead of I.
And he wanted to, and at that point I was probably willing to, I was really a dumb girl at that time. I was probably willing to do anything for him.
She switches to the singular pronoun I when she's quote-unquote criticizing herself. First, she again comes across as the bigger person, supposedly willing to sacrifice herself for Travis. Second, calling herself dumb is humble brag. Humble brag brings attention to the very thing you allegedly criticize yourself for. Saying she was just a dumb girl is also a cliché within confrontational interviews, a way of getting off the hook. In statement analysis, it's understood that people hate criticizing themselves unless it has a self-beneficial purpose. In this case, her surface-level self-criticism makes her seem less aware.
But he didn't know you were recording it.
Yeah, he did.
He knew you were recording his
Right.
conversations. Okay.
Yeah, that's what we talked about it on a chat conversation right prior to that, except it didn't come in as evidence.
The fact that this alleged agreement between Jodi and Travis didn't come in as evidence indicates that it wasn't significant.
From the outside looking in, the world looking at Jodi Arias at this point, they think that you love the attention. You know, you've allowed us to do interviews with you on the eve before the verdict. Are you enjoying the attention, for the record?
No, not this kind of attention. Not the kind of attention that I receive. Well, I'm not really aware of the attention. I'm very insulated where I am. And so, I mean, I get a lot of support mail.
This is not an assertive no, there's a pause before it. Let's see how she undermines this statement in the following.
Tell me about that. What kind of support mail?
Hundreds and hundreds. I have like 200 plus postcards right now that I don't even think that it's logistically possible to respond to everyone.
No, what are they saying to you? Just give me
Just,
an example of, you know, Joe Blow down the street.
Jodi, I listened to your testimony and I believe you. I'm in your corner. Or the best ones are when women write me and say, I was in a situation like yours before and I totally understand. Or thank you for your testimony. I've left the relationship that I was in because of what happened. Things like that. That if I can motivate one person to get out of a bad relationship, or if I can motivate one person to at least document what's going on, you know, something, then that's better than if they just went down the path that I went down.
Jodi takes the opportunity to act as an ambassador again. She's associating with the people who write to her, making them her allies, just like she made Travis an ally concerning the recordings. In other words, when it was convenient for her. By doing so, Jodi speaking on behalf of a collective we rather than a singular and isolated I. Shared experiences have psychological importance to a person, but in this context they come across as highly self-serving. Jodi makes her case with the alleged words of other people. Let's hear the last part again.
If I can motivate one person to get out of a bad relationship, or if I can motivate one person to at least document what's going on, you know, something, then that's better than if they just went down the path that I went down.
Once again, she's downplaying and euphemizing her crime. Path is similar to choices that she used earlier, indicating alternatives and not conscious and/or carefully planned decisions.
What do you want your legacy to be?
Well, it's not the best legacy, but if anything, I'd like to be an example.
She answers in the negative. Psychologically, it's easier and more comfortable to say what something negative is not than to say what something negative is, so that she avoids saying it's a bad legacy or something similar. Her answer is an example of the rule of the negative. Answering in the negative points to information that the subject wishes to conceal. In this case, one of the reasons is most likely that Jodi doesn't want to admit too much by criticizing herself. Her downplaying makes her sound very far from being remorseful and humble.
But if anything, I'd like to be an example of... I want people to see what happens when you don't document what's going on.
A cautionary tale.
Cautionary tale is good. I think that's appropriate.
Jodi repeats the interviewer's words cautionary tale by a process that conversation analysis calls lexical reuse, where you use another person's words. This happens in daily conversations all the time, but it's particularly important in a setting like this, where the accused is expected to show agreeableness. As an analyst, you should ask, is this really the opinion of the accused, or is the accused just parroting the interviewer?
I can't stress enough how important that is. We have so much technology that's so easy to operate this day, and it's affordable, and there's just ways to document what you're going through, so that there's never any question about what has happened, should that ever arise. You don't even have to use it. You don't have to turn in the person you love if you don't want to, because most people won't.
Yeah.
I know I certainly didn't want to.
Jodi knows she certainly wouldn't turn Travis in, again in a subtle way describing herself as a victim and as the bigger person.
What was your state of mind? I mean, you went there, you had hours of sex with this guy who you'd broken up with. He invited you in. Once again, confusing, muddying the waters, right?
Yes.
Were you just so frustrated with him and so angry with him?
No, I don't feel like I was ever angry with Travis.
The nature of Jodi's crime points to her indeed having been in an angry state of mind, so her claim here is incongruent with the nature of the crime she committed.
You were never a scorned, bitter woman, jealous by these other women.
I had no knowledge of it. I assumed there were other women, because that was his modus operandi. But we weren't in a relationship, so I can't dictate. I don't think I could ever dictate, even if we are in a relationship, what he does. That's his choice, and I was moving on in my area, and it was just hard to completely break away. So we hang out again like we always did. And
that Jodi wasn't trying to dictate Travis's decisions is contrary to what we know about Jodi. We know that she was very jealous of the women in Travis's life.
You just couldn't make that break.
Notice her facial expression when the interviewer suggests that Jodi couldn't make that break. She's not in agreement. See how her expression changes to agreement when the interviewer cleverly assigns Travis the blame instead.
And he really couldn't either. He kept inviting you back for more.
yeah, he did.
This corresponds to what we've observed so far, Jodi's self-serving agenda with this interview. When she's accused of something, she's either disagreeing or trying to turn the objection to her advantage.
He kept inviting you back for more.
Yeah, he did.
He kept inviting you back for more, the interviewer says, and we hear Jodi's quiet and almost hurt, yeah, he did. As an analyst, you know that Jodi grabs every chance she gets to flee her own responsibility and simultaneously portray Travis as the bad guy, the one who played with her emotions.
A lot of women have that problem. The ex still texting, there's some communication, they go back, they go forth, you know. There's a lot of women have that problem, but it doesn't end as horrifically tragic.
I know. Well, I don't think that ex attacks them and threatens to kill them. So I really wish that I could do all of that over, and I would never go there.
She knows how to use negative questions for her own benefit. She's nodding while the interviewer is mentioning this general problem. So far so good. But when the interviewer says that these problems don't end so horrifically tragic, we see the duality in Jodi's language. She starts with "I know," showing agreeableness, which is expected in a last-minute interview like this, and then makes a victim's assessment, only to then say that she wishes she would have never gone there. It's in her double talk that we see her agenda, to make excuses for her crime and present herself in the best light possible. The agenda becomes even more evident when the interviewer asks her this confrontational question.
Speaking of judgment, you must know all of America sits in judgment of Jodi Arias right now, and you really have been deemed the most hated woman in America. How does that make you feel?
I didn't know that. Actually, I feel a lot of love and support from people who write in and believe me and want to help me and want to be there for me, and I've received an outpouring of love and support from other people. So all of that, it doesn't reach me.
Even though she's smiling throughout the interview, She shows resistance towards this question. She visibly and audibly moves in her chair and then makes this claim, as an adverb actually shows us that the subject's comparing two contradictory thoughts at the same time. Here, Jodi's likely comparing the interviewer's confrontational statement to her own self-perception, and her own self-perception wins.
One of the deputies actually told me you had a mountain of mail in your jail cell and they actually had to get rid of it because it was a fire hazard. Is that true?
They made me one. I don't know when this was, but I was ordered to release it, so it went to my attorneys. Yeah.
Just too much for you to even open.
Well, we only get postcards here, so this was all mail that was read, and it just built up with time.
We notice how much more comfortable Jodi seems when the interviewer strokes her ego, pointing to all of Jodi's alleged support mail.
Okay. You know, Samantha Alexander, that day she took the stand and Stephen Alexander took the stand. There were moments where I think the jury finally saw you, maybe feeling some remorse. We saw you crying. We saw tears rolling down your cheeks. Samantha said, "We will never get those images of our brother's neck being slit out of our minds." How have you gotten that out of your mind?
Notice the subtle attack on Jodi's character in the interviewer's seemingly polite question. Finally, it presupposes that it's strange that Jodi didn't show remorse at an earlier point, and maybe cast doubt on Jodi's alleged remorse.
It's not out of my mind, but mostly I've avoided looking at it, but it's there. I've seen it.
This is distancing language. Of course Jodi's seen it. She was the one who committed the crime. She then takes a deep breath, which might very well be for dramatic effect, because her being emotional about this all of a sudden is inconsistent with her negative words about Travis and her otherwise unemotional stance during this interview. She then licks her lips as if wanting to take back the words she just said. A person can say all the right things and act innocent, but still be a liar and a deceiver. Jodi tries to act humble and remorseful, but in her formulations, she's prideful and creating distance to the crime she committed. Thanks for watching.